Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Watch your subscriber. Hope you will be fine and in the high state of iman and health. And I'm extremely sorry that there was a problem in my previous lecture and you were unable to fetch the particular information. I will repeat the lecture and I hope so that today you will get the special attention about special attention about voice clearance, and I hope so that it will be more better for you, and I'll try my best to signify it on the this new nomenclature or this new setup. And today we are going to discuss, my topic is Shakespearean tragedy, and I'll try my best to add some important factors of critical introduction to Othello. But before going, I'll try my best to give you the particular sequences of the Shakespearean tragedy. Shakespearean tragedy, nature and definition. Tragedy is a very difficult concept to define in spite of all that modern critics have said on this subject. Aristotle's definition of tragedy in the Poetics still remains the best. According to him, tragedy is a representation of an action which is serious, complete in itself, and of a certain magnitude. It is expressed in speech, made beautiful in different ways in different parts of the play. It is acted, not narrated, and by exciting pity and fear, gives a healthy relief to such emotions. Also, Shakespeare did not have a conscious conceptions about tragedy. Still, from his tragedies and serious plays, we can get together a notion of what constitutes Shakespearean tragedy. For example, one can easily agree with Dowden that Shakespeare's conceived tragedy as concerned with the ruin of restoration of the life of a man and of his soul. In many cases, it shows the struggle between good and evil. Similar, another critic appropriately referred to Shakespearean tragedy as the apotheosis exalting to goodhood of the soul of man. By soul of man, by far the more perceptive comments about Shakespearean tragedy are those of Bradley, who most defines the essence of Shakespearean tragedy as a tale of suffering and calamity conducting to death. Although this remark captures what is common to Shakespearean tragedy, it may be stressed that every Shakespearean tragedy is unique in its way, and that there are very few observations which one may make about one of them which are also applicable to the others. The tragic hero. That is the important part of Shakespearean tragedy. Wherever you are reading King Lear, you are reading Macbeth, you are reading Othello, or whatever Shakespearean work is under your hand, in your hand, and under or in front of your eyes. So the tragic hero is the main element. Shakespeare's tragedies are definitely built around a single personality who towers above the other characters in plays like Antony and Cleopatra and Macbeth. The central characters, for the most part, may be regarded as a double entity. Shakespeare's tragic heroic have many qualities in common. One of them is their intense concern for one thing or aspect of life. Also, it is doubtful whether Shakespeare knew The poetics, his heroes, with the possible exception of Macbeth, are all essentially good. Even Macbeth has an intensely poetic nature and is quite honest in in viewing his own viewing his own enormities. Shakespeare's tragic hero are of an extremely sensitive and poetic temperaments, Hamlet being the most intellectual and Othello the most poetic of them. Uh, uh, it would be pathetic. That might be a composing mistake, or might be uh, a printing error. uh, Pathetic of them, they also belong to the highest rung of society, the lowest in rank being Othello, who is at least a general whose descent may be traced to kings. In every one of the tragedies, the hero is faced either with making a moral choice of a grave consequences, or initiating some action which has far reaching consequences. The second most important element of the tragedy of the Shakespearean tragedy is tragic flaw. A Shakespearean tragedy is above all a tragedy of characters, though the environment chance and coincidence also play their own part. Some tragedies, notably Macbeth, include the supernatural also. Still, above all, it is some it is some trait in the character of the tragic hero which is the basis of the tragedy. We refer to this trait we refer to this trait as the tragic flaws. It is not as, necessarily always a shortcoming in itself. It is only in the particular situations which the hero is placed that the particular quality of character become vitally damaging to him. For example, Hamlet's habits of carefully weighing the pros and cons of everything before taking action would have proved an asset to Othello, while Othello's precipitateness of action would have cut short Hamlet's agonies. Thus, it is character in a particular situation which is the causative force behind Shakespearean tragedy. Though in a general way, it is quite correct to refer to them a tragedy of characters. A tragedy of character. It may be noted that the suffering of the hero is often quite out of proportion to the fault or faulty choice of which he is guilty. But it is an admitted fact that in tragedy, crime and punishment are never commensurate so we can find that at final stage, the tragic flaw is the most important factor of the Shakespearean tragedy. The next important point, or next important element, the role of chance and fate. Chance and fate, the later sometimes in the form of the supernatural, like in Macbeth, also play their part in Shakespearean tragedy. However, they are never the starting point of the tragedies, and are rather admitted into them when the story has already taken a definite course. The incident of the handkerchief in Othello is an example of pure chance which is exploited by the villain. But this chance takes place at a time when the seeds of jealousy have already attained a flourishing growth in Othello's mind. It is not the cause of Othello's jealousy. Similarly, even in Macbeth, we get the impression that the tree, which is only gives an outward shapes to a vaulting ambition, that is already there in Macbeth's mind. So The role of chance and fate, that is much important factor after tragic flaw. Now we are going to the next important point, and that is the theme and action. The coincident, the correlation, the significative embedment or engraving in between or embodiment of theme and action. Shakespeare's tragedy have a well-defined major theme which is often capable of being expressed in moral terms. For example, it may be said that the major theme of King Lear is regeneration, while the Othello is one of the making moral one of the making one of making a moral choice. The tragic action in Shakespeare somehow disturb universal harmony and order, and after the death of the hero, but there are often indicates that the disturbed harmony will be restored. Thus, the action involves a twofold conflict that between man and the universal forces, and that in the mind of man. Of those two, it is the latter which is Shakespeare's prime concern. Shakespeare's take his stories from other source, most of which have been identified, but he make significant changes in the story as it comes to him from his source. It is those changes which often tell us how Shakespeare's mind work. The story often includes the story often includes the story. Let me repeat the line. We have The story often includes including sensational incidents such as murder, madness, duels, and the like, but they are naturally and are not incorporated into the story for the sake of sensation. Shakespeare does not conform to classical view of tragedy, which insisted on the purity of genres, and in the hand of the neoclassicist also on unities of time and place. For Shakespeare's the prime unity is that of tragic effect, and disregards all other unities. The Shakespearean tragedy are characterized by strong senses of inevitability. So that is called the theme and action. So before going to the next important factor, and that is the characterization. Also the Also, the tragic hero is the center of the dramatist's attention. At least one other character near him is also brought into the limelight. In some tragedies, there are several other characters who have an important functions in the story, and whose characterizations therefore receives appropriate attentions. Where we have a double plot, the characters in the second plot parallel those in the major plot, also on a smaller scale. Let me just change my just a bit. Let me just change my position, because here we have got some sunshine which is disturbing a lot. So let me just change my place for a better perspective. Thank you very much, and you have hold. Thanks for your compliment and your company. So Shakespearean tragedy have unforgettable feminine characters. Through the tragic protagonists are all men. Notable among women characters are Cordelia, Ophelia, Lady Macbeth, and Cleopatra, who in fact Shakespeare's the role of protagonist with Antony. The tragedies also have minor characters, some of whom are delineated wonderfully well. Also, their appearance in the play may be a very brief one. Interestingly, Shakespearean tragedies also have unforgettable comic characters, among whom one may mention the porter in Macbeth and the in King Lear. They also have well delineated villains. The most, that is also a composing mistake here, so correct the spelling of villains. The most interesting of whom is Iago. The most important villain is Iago. Now I got that the actual word is villain, not villain. So that is a composing mistake again, so correct it. The most interesting of whom is Iago because of a note of mystery about his motives. So after characterization, another point, and that is the tragic effect. That also sometimes correlated with tragic flaw or the role of chance and fate, but it have its individual impact and individual importance. Even without knowing the poetics, Shakespeare's manage to excite strong pity and terror in his tragedies. However, these are not these are not the only emotions which the excite. In the opinion of Bradley, the characteristics emotions aroused by Shakespearean tragedy is a profound sense of waste. This is derived from the idea of human worth and dignity, which the plays expresses, and the missed opportunities or wrong choices which led to man's defeat without affecting his essential dignity. Shakespearean tragedy embody a sense of profound suffering and sadness, and some of them end in a number of deaths. The most conspicuous in the respect being Hamlet and King Lear, where the stage is literally littered with dead bodies in the last scene. All the same, they do not leave a depressing effect on the mind. There is something towards the close which restores which restores our faith in the man's greatness and God's wise providence. The atmosphere, in fact, is one of calm serenity, very well expressed by Milton in the closing line of Samson's agonized agonites. We are giving the impression that the suffering has not gone waste. It has either enabled the protagonist, other characters, or the audience to attain a new insight, or has walked toward a better future. Many Shakespearean tragedies characteristically end on a note of hope. So next important point, and that is the mature tragedies in Shakespearean tragic views, or in Shakespearean's tragedy. In Shakespearean tragedy, according to Traversy, the conceptions elaborated in Shakespeare's mature tragedies are complex. They are interrelations of themes even further extended, but there is no longer any sense of a gap between purpose and achievement. The predominating tragic conflicts correspond to state of feeling more formed, defined, more clearly conceived in terms of a possible resolution. In Othello, the heart of the tragic experience is revealed in its full intensity. The emotional unity is reflected in clearer conception of characters, and in a more truly dramatic presentation of conflict. The subject of all these great play can be described general in general terms as the working out to its inevitable conclusion of the disruptive effect of the entry of passing into normal human experience. By this entry, the balance essentials to right living between the passionate and rational elements in the personality is overthrown, and what should have been orderly, vital, and purposeful is plunged into disorder, death, and anarchy. The next important point, and the second last point, we can say it last two, because at the end I will give you the Shakespeare's personal view. So passion versus reasons. The predominant tragic conflict in the mind of the tragic heroes in the mature tragedies is generally between passion and reason, is in the plays which precedes them. Now, however, this conflict is no longer shown exclusively in the form of an internal cleavage, and becomes something more truly dramatic, a clash between contrasted and opposed personalities and orders. In, in other words, the opposites between reasons and passion, first isolated through Othello and Iago in a dramatic conflict of personalities, and then that's a composing mistake again, projected in Macbeth and Lear, beyond King Lear, beyond the individual hero to the state and universe which surrounded him, is merged increasingly into another of greater significance and profundity between highly personal conception of good and evil. Before going to Shakespeare's personal view, that is my last point of today's lecture. So I hope so. We will discuss critical introduction to Othello in our next lecture, inshallah. And again requesting that if you are new on my channel, so subscribe and hit the bell icon. Thank you very much. Shakespeare's personal view. Many books have been written on subject such as Shakespeare's religion, but in the play themselves, there is very little which can be definitely looked upon coming from Shakespeare himself. On the whole, Shakespeare is the most impersonal writer, and this probably was responsible to some extent for making him the great dramatist that he is. It is only in a rough and ready way that we can surmise some of Shakespeare's personal like and dislikes. Summarize. That is another mistake, composing mistake, or might be printing mistake, that we can summarize some of Shakespearean's personal like and dislikes. For example, Shakespeare uses the image of the fawning dog so often, and charge it with some let me just I have missed the line, and let me just, yeah. Shakespeare uses the image of the fawning dog so often, and charges it with so much contempt that it may be assumed that this was one of his intense abhorrence. Similarly, we may say that failings in character, there is a little doubt that whatever his brand of Christianity, Shakespeare was deeply religious and compassionate. Also, there are occasional outbursts of cynicism which must be viewed in the context of the character. The tendency of the plays on the whole is towards strong humanism. In this context, one may quote the very apt observation of one of Shakespeare's modern biographies. Ivor Brown remarks with justice in the case, now I'm giving you the quotation, in the justice of another who left no personal papers and whose writing are mainly in dramatic form. It is not easy to be precise about his views and personal traits, yet many have believed that Shakespeare's image is fully mirrored in his work. George Bernard Shaw has claimed that he knows, that's also a composing mistake or printing mistake, no more of him that of Charles Dickens or William Thackeray or William Thackeray. That is quite familiar, but I have learned it from Professor Razi Abdi Sahab as William Thackeray. No, no writer can wholly disguise himself apart from definite definite expressions of opinion. His language and his metaphors betray his predilections and aversions. It is not impertinent. It is not vain to try to find the figure behind the glorious hand. Thus, impersonality also is relative, for while there are no explicit autobiographical touches in Shakespeare's, even he could not have kept his own views, likes and dislikes entirely out of his writings. So I have completed all the impacts and all the important points of Shakespearean tragedy in this lecture. So we will discuss in our next lecture. The topic would be critical introduction of Othello, in date of writing, the source, the story, Othello and other Shakespearean tragedies, distinctive features of the plot, swiftness of piece, the characters, domestic tragedy, suspense, Othello's entity, double time, rapid movement, use of long time, brilliant of effects, and so on. So I'm going to complete my lecture here right now. So before going, again requesting you that kindly subscribe and hit the bell icon. So let me go now, and next lecture, the after that will be plot construction in Othello, and we will discuss it in a brief and in all the impactive details, inshallah. So let me go now and say with me, do something more for humanity, do something more for knowledge and practices. Have a good day.